Well, the battle lines are more and more clearly drawn and more fiercely fought. And our next participant and contestant will be Dr. Erika Wagner of Aeronastro, and the director of the X Prize Lab. It's a pleasure to introduce her. She has special interests in biomedical engineering, bioastronautics, student satellite development, and sending problem students into space. with enough Latkes and Hamentashen to last several centuries. So she actually has sent students into space already and spun them at precisely 32 RPM in order to simulate Mars gravity, and then has studied their physiology. Turns out they could keep Latke down pretty well after that experience. Had a little trouble with Hamentashen, and they're working on the proper kinds of treatments, medications, and so forth to enable that to go further. She has another interesting specialization, which she calls Spock tails. You know, when you're up there in the Mars orbit, and it's been a long day, what are you going to drink? It's not so easy, right? So the key discovery that's enabled the development of a number of practical Spock tails is the fact that Hamentashen turn out to serve well as a binding medium for strongly alcoholic beverages. The content of alcohol that can be stored in a single snack is just staggering. So in fact, all of the both consumable and beverage needs of the student astronauts who are demanding this kind of refreshment in these long journeys can be met with some of the results of her research. Well, so without further ado, Professor or Dr. Wagner.
So for my opportunity here as director of the X Prize Lab, I think a lot about incentivized competition and how we can use competitions to decide the outcomes of very murky debates. So I'll be talking today about a case for inducement prizes to competitively determine culinary greatness. So mission of the X Prize Foundation is to bring about radical breakthroughs. These aren't little incremental changes, these are radical changes, and we use competitions in order to do that. Incentive prizes have been around for ages. They involve a very clear target and a prize for competition. So you can imagine the ancient Egyptians standing at the top of the pyramids. I'll give the beer to the first one to jump off. That's a very clear inducement prize. Perhaps one of the most well-documented early prizes, however, came from the British government, trying to keep their ships from running afoul of rocks. They knew how to determine latitude, they didn't know how to determine longitude. This led to some not so great results, especially after eating lots and lots of Hamentashen. John Harrison, who you see here, claimed the top prize. Most of his competitors were looking at triangulation, celestial triangulation in particular, using the stars and planets as ways of determining longitude. John Harrison was smarter than that. He said, if I only knew what time it actually was where I started, I can determine longitude with quite a great deal of accuracy. And he took home the prize purse, which was worth about $13 million in today's economy. Now, it's obvious to me that not only is his pocket watch much more in keeping with the Latke, but if we were to run a similar contest today and ask who among the Latke and Hamentashen would take home the longitude prize, no questions asked. This is Latke in action. Now, the $25,000 Orteig Prize, put up in 1919 to spur transatlantic aircraft and the advent of modern aviation, was really a breakthrough watershed moment in the early 20th century. And it was offered by Raymond Orteig, who was a hotelier, came from Paris to the US, said, I want to see a little more kibitzing and let's go fly between them. Charles Lindbergh was the underdog of his day, standing up against such great explorers as Admiral Byrd, standing on the tarmac the same day. Lindbergh flying across the Atlantic on nothing but a very non-kosher diet of meat and cheese sandwiches, manages to take home that prize. So I've researched the first transatlantic Latke and Hamentashen crossings. if we look at the crossing of the Latke, we see a very rapid transit from the earliest days of exploration of potatoes going from the old world, or from the new world back to the old world. And we also see a very quick transit back of oil and potatoes making way for the first Latkes in the new world. If we watch for the Hamentashen, it's a very, very, very slow journey. And we eventually see the first Jews coming to New York in the late 1600s. So clearly, if we are to look at just transatlantic crossings, Latkes take the cake. If we're going to think about this purely in terms of aviation crossings even, if we look at the menus of the early days of aviation, we see potatoes as a staple in the fine dining of many of our transatlantic crossings. Hamentashen? Really? Next, the Ansari X Prize, launched by an MIT alum in 1996, awarded $10 million to the first suborbital spaceflight, first commercial suborbital spaceflight. First vehicles to take three people, or their mass equivalent, up to 100 kilometers and back, twice in 2 weeks. The winning vehicle is now taken home $10 million, hanging in the world's most trafficked museum lobby in the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., Spaceship One, right next to the Spirit of St. Louis that carried Lindbergh across the Atlantic. Now, we're a little too early in commercial spaceflight history to know who is the definitive winner of the modern Ansari X Prize of the Latke-Hamentashen era. But if we are to look into who is going to be the likely prospective winner, I harken back to an argument made by my colleague Jeffrey Hoffman, 5-time shuttle astronaut and debater in this illustrious panel in 2002, who pointed out that on board the space station, not only are there potatoes, but also applesauce and sour cream, making for a fantastic in-flight meal. No Hamentashen to be found. Why are there no Hamentashen to be found? Well, safety is a key priority in spaceflight. And as Jeff was quick to point out, no sharp edges, no corners, no triangles, and for goodness sakes, please, no crumbs. So, if we are to postulate the winner of the Ansari Latke-Hamentashen Prize, I think that the potatoes have it hands down. One more prize to conclude my evening. The Académie de Besançon of France, following the great famine of the early 18th century in France, put out a prize for the first person to discover a new vegetable that can help in the case of famine, and in particular to help the patients of dysentery recover from famine. So if we were to harken back to the earlier argument about potatoes versus Latkes, or potatoes versus Hamantash, in the great debate of world hunger, this is a key moment. And we see that Antoine Parmentier, sort of the European equivalent of George Washington Carver, discovered and popularized the use of potatoes in all of their forms, including, of course, the latke. So I believe that competitive history shows that there's no question here. If we are to let prizes be the determining factor, we shall see that the latke reigns supreme.